As I just realized I was muted this entire time. All right, that's wonderful. But let's try this again. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central Podcast, episode 22. As we will be discussing the series that just occurred against the Boston Red Sox. Probably not talk too much about the White Sox series because there's really not a lot to talk about. The Mets took advantage of future Wendy's employees, so there's really not a lot to dissect when it comes to that series. Instead, we're really just going to dial in on the Red Sox series. We apologize for no episode after that White Sox series, though. Just sometimes life is life, so just couldn't get an episode out. But we will, of course, continue the regularly scheduled programming. So yeah, Mets get a sweep. It's nice that we don't have to talk about them losing any games over the past 6 games either way, because even with that White Sox series, not really anything bad to talk about. There's really nothing bad to talk about unless you want to nitpick and say the Mets are winning games despite arguably not playing their best baseball, which you could look at that 2 different ways. You could look at that in a way as it's great because they are finding a way to win regardless, or you could look at it as this is, it's alarming because at some point they'll regress back to the mean. We're going to discuss all of it. Before we jump into the discussion further, leave a like on your way into the live stream. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live here on Met Central. But yeah, sweeps, back-to-back sweeps. How are we feeling?
Back-to-back sweeps, 7 wins in a row, 12 games over 500, and still not in a wild card position. That's really the most frustrating part, is because you look at, especially last year with the playoff race, the Diamondbacks got in with the last wild card spot at 84 wins, and it looks like this year it's going to take 88, 89, maybe even 90 wins to get into a playoff spot this year. It's really tough, but look, as I've said, for right now, like, the Mets just got to keep on winning games and keep on winning what's in front of them. And that's what they're doing right now. Now you got a 3-game set against the Cincinnati Reds. And before going into this Boston Red Sox series, I was saying, listen, take 2 out of 3, and with the whole homestand, look to go 5-1, sweep the Reds. But look, now looking at it, you sweep the Red Sox, go on a 6-0 homestand. Take advantage of another poor team you're playing.
Yeah, I agree. I think even if they don't sweep the Reds, I will still take 5-1, like, because that's what I said going into this homestand, that I would sign up for a 5-1 homestand. To start 3-0, huge, absolutely huge. And I have to say that I am looking pretty on par with what I said a couple weeks ago after they blew that game against the Diamondbacks. I said that I didn't really want to hear about the playoffs unless they go on a 7+ game win streak, because quite frankly, I don't think it was realistic to think they would make the playoffs unless that happened. And then, like you said, right now, they've won 7 in a row and they're still outside the playoff picture. So it's really infuriating that regard, that they're just not getting the help they need. And I'm at the point where, because as of right now, the Giants are losing to the Diamondbacks, of course. And in terms of other scoreboard watching, Rockies Braves is at 7:20 tonight, and then the Tigers and Padres play at 8:40. So, of course, going to be scoreboard watching there. But yeah, as of right now, I'm sitting here on September 5th and saying to myself, all the Mets have to do is tread this water. And I know that I've been saying for a while that they can't keep treading water. At some point, you got to win games. With the way that this is going, tread water for another 3 weeks until you get to Atlanta. And then that's really where the Mets are going to make or break their season, if they could continue to tread water, which I don't think is unreasonable to say, because they play the Reds, they play the Blue Jays, play the Phillies, Nationals, and then the Phillies again. Some of those teams are tough, and then even then, if you look at the easier teams, as we've learned over the course of August, you can't just look at the easy teams and say, yeah, they're going to win these games. But on the surface, these are teams that you should at least be able to scrape a good amount of wins out against, and you should be able to keep yourself afloat to where you are sitting, like, at most they could be 1.5 to 2 games out, I would say, going into that Atlanta series, if they still want a chance of the postseason, because then at that point you have to sweep Atlanta. So realistically, it'd be better if they could just get one game out or stay half a game out until they get down to Atlanta, because that's really where I'm at. Because right now, it's the Diamondbacks just expanded their lead. It's just I don't know how much more they could count on some of these teams losing.
Yeah, so I recall back when we did the post game reaction after that horrible loss against the Diamondbacks where Edwin Diaz just had that blown save right at the end. I remember saying that, like, even if the Mets don't make the playoffs, just continue to win your games and put pressure on on the Atlanta Braves. Well, not only are they doing that by going on a 7-game heater right now, but they're also within striking distance of both the Padres and the Diamondbacks. Like, they're only about 3 games, 2.5 games back of those two teams. So just in case if the Braves don't fall out, maybe, I know the Diamondbacks are going to have a tough schedule in the next couple weeks with 2 series in Milwaukee. I think both combine those, that's a big 7-game series right there. And their next series is against the Houston Astros, I think, in Houston. So the Diamondbacks are going to have a tough schedule. The Mets will have a tough schedule too, with, of course, going to Atlanta and having those two big series against the Philadelphia Phillies, one here at Citi Field and one at Citizens Bank Park against in Philadelphia. But listen, most likely, and we've been saying this series, this season is going to come down to that one in Atlanta. And you know what? Maybe it's the best thing for this group, this franchise, this roster, to face their demons against the Atlanta Braves and get revenge for 2022. Because you know what? I'm not saying that if they go down to Atlanta and take 2 out of 3 and, jump the Braves, that they're going to go out and win the World Series this year. I'm not saying that, but, these guys, they got to face their demons. I mean, similarly, you take a look at, the Washington Capitals in 2018. In order to get over that hump, they had to go into Pittsburgh and defeat the Penguins. And eventually they did that. They beat them in 6 games and led eventually to a Stanley Cup. Now, listen, like I said, I'm not saying that the Mets are going to win a World Series just by basically taking 2 out of 3 from the Atlanta Braves. But you know what? That would just be a nice confidence booster. And, I'm sure if they did that, those guys in that locker room, in that clubhouse would say, you know what, we just did something that this franchise and this group specifically, like I said, going back to 2022, we just beat our bogey team. Now we have some confidence rolling into the playoffs. Maybe we can have a deep run.
Yeah, even just the history of this franchise, it's just always been Atlanta's the place where, it's where they die. It's always in Atlanta, and this is an opportunity to really build something special. But of course, either way, that's 3 weeks from now. So we'll of course discuss it as we're going on. But yeah, I think we're all in a similar boat to where this is at somewhat one way or another. This is gonna come down to that series in Atlanta, and it's annoying because of the PTSD we have, but it kind of is what it is. But to talk about this Boston series now, yeah, I mean, this really was a series where you only were like, I was really only worried during part of game 2, maybe I would say, and then part of the last game. The first game was probably the easiest game, honestly, of them all, that they got the job done. And granted, the thing is with this series still, the offense has honestly just not been perfect at all. Like, the offense really is... I still have worries with the offense going forward, because there are inconsistency patterns here of not capitalizing with runners in scoring position, and a lot of it is Lindor. And I do gotta say, I gotta apologize to Jesse Winker, because right now he is on an absolute heater, and if he's gonna keep hitting like this, I will fill out the apology form and have no issue doing that, because right now he's starting to perform a lot better. But outside of those two, and you had a couple of guys contribute here and there, like Alonso in that second game, but a lot of inconsistencies with the offense. But the story of the series was the pitching, and how you got quality pitching left and right. And even when Mendoza, it looked like, was trying to be too cute and cut corners, especially in that third game, where we were at it and we were, sitting there playing manager in the seats and losing our minds over certain decisions he was making. But, Severino gives you a solid start, gives you volume in that start, 7 innings. You get Danny Young, who continues to just be unbelievable, who chucks a scoreless inning. Phil Maton continues to look dominant, chucks a scoreless inning. You go to game 2, David Peterson, I would argue, had his best start of the season. And I know that, again, I said it during the post game that you might not look at it as the sexy start because he did allow a couple of extra hits, didn't give you as much volume as you maybe would have liked. But I look at the double-digit strikeout total and say, you need that from David Peterson more if you want to sell me on the fact that he could be a postseason guy. Then in game 2, like I said, you did have a little bit of worries. Jose Budo gives you those scares a little bit because they tried to give him more than an inning, which, again, I stand by the fact that he needs to just be a one-inning guy down the stretch here. Like, they need to stop trying to squeeze lemonade out of this lemon more from Jose Budo. He hasn't pitched this many innings before, so they need to keep him the one inning. Reed Garrett, though, great. Stanek getting close to the circle of trust potentially. And then the last game, McGill gives you 4 innings, and, you know, you really wanted more. But thankfully, there's an off day tomorrow, and Mendoza said, we're not going to fuck around. We're going to win this game. I'm going to empty the tank with the bullpen. And you get scoreless frames from Alex Young. You get an inning and a third from Brazaban, an inning and a third from Danny Young, who looked unbelievable yet again. Phil Maton, the most shaky out of the pen, and it scared us. And then Diaz looked sharp yet again. You're starting to see things fall in the right place for the bullpen. And if this lineup could just start to become even more dangerous like we've seen before and like we know they could. And by the way, did this without JD Martinez. This entire series they swept without Martinez. So they're getting the lineup help coming back. And maybe a little bit of a reset for Martinez will help. That could potentially extend this winning streak beyond 7 games.
Yeah, no, the pitching was the main storyline of this series and why the Mets ultimately swept them, because like you said, Sevy had a nice, easy, comfortable outing. David Peterson was really the one that impressed me the most, because we've seen over his last couple starts where he's been stretching out his appearances, you know, mostly going 7 innings, 6 innings. But when you really looked how he pitched, it was basically more relying on the defense, getting ground balls, and like I said, relying on the defense to get those outs for you. But he really switched it up his last start against the Red Sox, and it really impressed me because it looked a lot more like a Sean Manaea start, where he really adopted the fastball high up in the zone, and he was able to generate a lot more swings and misses with that. I think he was able to get 10 or 11 strikeouts. I'm pretty sure it was 10, but yeah, double-digit strikeouts, and that's something that you like to see from David Peterson. And the bullpen also was just insane because, like you said, we were at that game last night, and McGill, while, you know, 4 innings, he wasn't exactly great, and you could tell early on in the game that he necessarily didn't have it because a lot of balls were being hit deep and, you know, to the warning track and deep in the outfield. So you'd figure that it was going to be a short start for him. And credit to Carlos Mendoza, because right at the start in the 4th inning, where I think he either issued a leadoff walk or a leadoff single, he was quick to pull the plug. And we were sitting there, we were saying, I mean, look, this bullpen has been better a lot lately, but when you're asking for 6 innings and 18 outs from any bullpen, that's tough, especially from a Red Sox lineup that, okay, maybe it's not the best lineup in the MLB, but you have guys that can do some serious damage, you know, whether that be guys like Rafael Devers, Tyler O'Neill, Yoshida, Jarren Duran. So it was pretty uncomfortable sitting there, and especially, you know, watching a guy like Brazaban, who we don't have exactly the utmost confidence in coming into that game. But credit to Brazaban, he was good. Danny Young came in, and, you know, a guy that's in my circle of trust. He's been another great find by David Stearns this year. Alex Young again was great. And listen, like Phil Maton, like while he wasn't like necessarily great, what I liked about Maton was he buckled, but he did not break. You know, I think it was 1st and 2nd with 2 outs, and he was able to maneuver and get out of the inning. So credit to him. And Phil Maton, man, I think we got to give some more love to this guy, because if you looked when the Mets first acquired him, because let me pull it. I think he had like a 4-something ERA, like a 4.56, because I checked earlier. And ever since the trade, he's had like a 1.56 ERA, something around there. So he was able to lower that ERA down by 3. So he's just been impressive out of that bullpen. And considering that trade was just for cash considerations, I mean, what a steal of a trade by David Stearns there.
I want to go back to the thing with Peterson, especially because this, like you said, I mean, he was getting the swing and miss stuff that you want to see your pitchers get. And I 100% am with you. And I think that was some sort of conversation between him and Manaea, because David Peterson in that start against Arizona, he had 36 swings. How many whiffs do you think were on those 36 swings against?
23.
This was the Diamondback start, not the Red Sox one.
Oh, the Red Sox. Oh, okay.
The Diamondbacks one, the one before this one.
Probably 12.
He had 6. This past start, he had 20 whiffs on 49 swings. So, yeah, he was getting the swing and miss stuff that you need to see. And most importantly, he was not allowing as hard of contact. And it's only like a 2 mile per hour difference, but the hardest hit he allowed, or the hardest contact he allowed, I should say, in that game against the Red Sox, I believe was like 103 or something, versus the Diamondbacks one where it was around like 106. So it's only a couple, like 2-3 ticks down, but still, you need this from him going forward. And I know that people are going to say, well, you know, whatever works for him works for him. It's the results that matter at the end of the day. But you want stuff that's more sustainable. And what he did in his last start, that is way more sustainable. And to that, I said in the post game then, if he's going to start generating this swing and miss type stuff, he all of a sudden is being penciled in my opinion, as the number 2 starter, unless Kodai Senga, which we'll get to the injury report later, it looks like he might come back. But David Peterson might win himself into the wild card rotation if he's going to generate that type of stuff, because no offense to him, but I really worry when you face the better teams, when you face teams that are hitting the ball hard, how is he going to fare? And, you know, again, if he's going to start to generate that, that's going to change everything for him. And there was also, like, the thing that also makes me think there was some sort of conversation is he was really using his fastball in that last start. That was his pitch that he used the most. And what has Sean Manaea been doing ever since watching Chris Sale film? Using the fastball.
Using the fastball,
yeah. Yeah, and there had to be something there, because I do want to see now. That makes me curious. Yeah, because the start before, the pitch that he used the most was his sinker, and then his slider was his second most pitch, then his four seam. Well, he threw the slider and four seam the same amount, 19 pitches. But if there's a conversation there about his fastball and he could start to gain confidence with that, we might see David Peterson go from a level that we were already talking about being, well, some fans, I should say, where they were saying with the ground ball stuff even that he was dominant and all that stuff. But that conversation changes drastically, and that's a guy that becomes all of a sudden on another level if he ends up reaching that type of level.
And another thing that I find impressive is not only that both him and Manaea are able, to increase the amount of innings they've worked and increase the number of strikeouts and the amount of whiffs they've had, but they've also lowered the walks. Because David Peterson, that start against the Red Sox, only had one walk, and we know, like, obviously Manaea at the start of the year, he had major control issues, which limited his innings that he was able to go. And same thing with Peterson. That's always been his biggest struggle with the Mets ever since he came up in 2021. Because we know when David Peterson has his stuff, like, he can be a dominant pitcher, but when he loses control of the zone, you could just tell right away. It's like, yeah, he's gonna walk the ballpark here, and this game is not gonna be pretty. And we've seen that many times throughout his tenure so far with the New York Mets. But I think right now, like you mentioned, like David Peterson winning a start so far in a potential 3-game wildcard series. I mean, look, right now for the Mets, they have a good problem on their hands, because especially like you mentioned, if Senga comes back, and it looks like that most likely he will, and what's the biggest part of that thing is he's most likely going to come back as a starter. So now you look at a 3-game set in a wildcard series, you have 4 guys that you could pick from to start a game. You got Manaea, you got Sevy, you got Peterson, and you have Senga potentially. That's huge. and especially in the playoffs. I mean, usually we see teams cut down to a 3-man rotation, but if you're able to have 4 guys that are able to just go in, game out, I mean, that's huge for this team. Especially, when you go back to the start of the year and we thought that the pitching, especially the starting rotation, was going to be the biggest weakness of this team. Well, so far throughout this stretch right now, this 7-game stretch, it's been their strongest attribute, this team.
Yeah, it really does just open a whole door of possibilities for the Mets if he's going to continue this, because just to build on it further into, because I haven't sung the praises of Peterson all season long, and you're finally getting it. Like, I know Carson did it last episode because we did that collaboration there, but you haven't got any praise from me yet this year. He only allowed 3 hard hit balls that entire start last time, and that Arizona one allowed 7. Like, cutting back, just things like that. Again, it just changes drastically how people like myself view David Peterson, where, instead of thinking he's a luck merchant, it's all of a sudden a conversation where this is legit stuff that could translate and be sustainable going forward. But again, I'm not going to completely run down the street naked just yet and celebrate that David Peterson is all of a sudden an ace. I want to see it build, but if this ends up being what Peterson is, where he's getting that stuff, and like you said, with the walks especially, which Mets pitching in general walks to a limit this time. They allowed like 11 walks in one game at points. This series, they allowed a combined, like, I think it was actually 11 walks, ironically, combined this entire, because they had 4 last night, they had 3 the night prior, and then 3 before that. So yeah, they allowed like less walks that in this entire series versus that entire time. And granted, Boston's lineup was also swinging at a lot more stuff, but I also attest that to the fact that you have your pitchers that are just performing so much better than they've been, like Severino and Peterson especially. And now you roll into the next game where you have Manaea going against the Reds, and Quintana, we might want to, close our eyes when we're watching him pitch. But regardless, like, it's so much more tolerable to watch too. It's just so much more enjoyable to watch when this pitching staff is going. And the offense had their big breakout in July. It was time for the pitching to do it. And at some point, and hopefully it is when it matters the most, it will be cohesive. And that could be scary if they're going to pitch like this down the stretch and the offense gets going. This team all of a sudden goes from a level that we are already talking about them being like a really good baseball team, that takes them to a whole different level.
Yeah, like what you were saying about the walks, because I just checked the final game of that Oakland A's series, the entire pitching staff combined for 11 walks just in that one game. This last series, though, 11 walks the whole 3-game series. So they've really cut down on that. So that's really impressive. But I mean, like, just to give more left to the bullpen, because Mike Mayer posted this on Twitter. The Mets bullpen over the last week, 0.83 ERA, 4 saves with a WHIP of 0.65. And this is not even the bullpen at its full strength, because while Danny Young's pitching well, Alex Young's pitching well, Budo's been decent. Diaz, ever since the 2 collapses, he's been much better. But especially if Scott's able to come back and he can go into that bullpen, and even hopefully Nunez is able to come back and he slots into that bullpen. Like, this bullpen right now is, you have guys pitching well and you have more weapons that you could potentially add to if they're able to come back and stay healthy. So the pitching right now has just been a massive weapon for this team so far. Hopefully it continues forward, and hopefully the offense is able, to bounce out a bit more, and we just don't see the offense scoring in just, chunks per game. Hopefully we start to see it go back to where it was in July, where it was sustained throughout the whole game, where it's like, okay, like, we'll score some in the beginning, score some in the middle of the game, and score some in the end.
Yeah, exactly. And you're starting to see these guys in the pen also develop their roles. And that's where I still do have some concerns, of course, because listen, there are times where Carlos Mendoza, when he manages the way he did last night, it's going to backfire, because I still believe you got to start using your best guys against their best hitters. Like, there was no reason for Adam Ottavino to be warming up in the 8th inning when Maton got into trouble and it looked like maybe things were going to implode. There was no reason for Adam Ottavino to even be throwing out there in the bullpen, which he's someone that I don't understand what they're trying to even, like, I don't know what he's on the roster for anymore, because there is literally nothing he adds to this bullpen. There's a reason that he didn't touch the diamond once in this entire series, because they were winning baseball games. They said, we don't want to put you in any of these games. He is not. It might have even been like, did he get any of the game? Maybe like one against the White Sox, right?
I think he got two.
He got one.
I know one for sure.
He got one. I just looked, and it was 2/3 of an inning, which living up to his name. But yeah, like I said, he's someone that I'm still trying to put together what they're trying to accomplish anymore with Ottavino, because you have him and Stanek who are in a similar boat, and I'd rather roll the dice with Stanek turning himself back into, what he was earlier in the year with Seattle, and judging by what he's been the last few outings even, I'm willing to roll the dice there versus keeping Ottavino around. And that's where they got to have the conversation about when this bullpen gets healthy of, who ends up going. Because right now, I mean, it will probably be the same guys that we saw before, like Brazaban and Alex Young. But, I mean, how could you justify Ottavino not being the first guy cut when he looks like the only guy without a role right now? Like, we saw it this series. I don't know. I don't know if you have additional thoughts on that, but
I kind of hope, and I kind of think, like, I'm not 100% sure, but I kind of have a feeling that we could see the end of Ottavino this upcoming week, just because Blackburn is coming back and he had a pretty decent start in Syracuse for his rehabilitation start. So he's going to pitch again in the Blue Jays series. So now that means McGill is out of the rotation. I would imagine, and I think it would be smart for them. Now, even though not a big McGill fan, and even though he hasn't been necessarily great, I think at this point you get rid of Ottavino, because, like you said, he doesn't have a role in this bullpen, and slot Tyler McGill into the bullpen and let him be the long man. Because right now this Mets bullpen doesn't have a long relief man. Sure, Budo was kind of used as that guy like a couple weeks ago, but they've really started to go away from that and more as like a one inning, 2 inning guy late in games. So the Mets don't really have a long relief guy right now, and McGill is the ideal guy to fill in that spot in that bullpen for that specific role.
Yeah, I agree. Which, Michael, what's going on? How you doing? But yeah, and thank you for saying that you like the show. But yeah, I agree. I mean, we said it during the last podcast when we did that with Carson, Frank, and Andrew, that we were all 5 of us said it, that this bullpen needs a long man. Like, at some point you're gonna need it, and especially when you have games like you did last night, where, listen, obviously Tyler McGill was the starter, ironically, but it's Jose Quintana at the end of the day. Like, I'm not counting on him to give more than 5 innings each time he goes out there. It's just something that's unrealistic, and they need somebody back there that could log the innings, because it's unrealistic to get 18 outs from your bullpen, or sometimes even 15's tough to get from your bullpen, and it just helps these guys get the proper rest they need to. So I hope that it is the end for Ottavino coming up, because he had that great 22 season, but the time's got to end. Like, I don't know what what they're holding on for anymore. There's really, I don't know what they see that we're not, that they're still just letting him stay on this pitching staff. But yeah, I hope that ends up being the case, because they need to get someone like him out who just does not have a role. But yeah, either way, a lot more positives with the bullpen, a lot more positives with the pitching. So really not much else to add to that, unless you do. Is there anything else you wanted to add with the pitching at all?
No, I was just gonna add on with the McGill long man thing. I mean, look, even like not even just a precaution to like a potential bad Jose Quintana start because we know we don't necessarily trust Jose Quintana, but even like when you're big guys in your rotation, even when they don't have a good game, or even if they potentially get hurt. I mean, you recall back to the second game of the Diamondback series where Sevy only went 4 or 5 innings and he took a ball off the foot and it looked like he wasn't going to be able to continue. He did, but he had a shorter start in general, and that was one of those games where Mendoza had to really maneuver around that bullpen and get a lot of outs from that bullpen. So even like you know if one of your top guys doesn't have it, you can use McGill in that situation to give you like 3 or 4 innings, so you don't have to burn out the rest of your bullpen in that situation.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, and even when Blackburn, took the line drive, you need you need these long men back there. You just do. So we'll see what shakes up with the bullpen, and again, we'll get to the injury reports later on to discuss further potentially reinforcements coming back or not coming back because there is news on both ends. But we'll talk about, of course, the offense, which was really not like, despite them scoring a good amount of runs as a whole in the series, like you look at how many runs they got, the offense left a bit on the table, and there's still guys that you're still wanting more from. And I really don't think it's a secret that it's underwhelming. Like Pete Alonso, especially. I know that in that second game, I know that he had the two RBIs and went 2 for 4. But last night he went 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. In that first game as well, he went 0 for 3 with a strikeout. He needs to get more consistent. Brandon Nimmo continues to be inconsistent, which is honestly, it's getting to the point where I'm a little worried because it looked like he was maybe breaking out of it a little bit during the White Sox series, but it just hasn't really, and even the Diamondback series a bit, but it really hasn't materialized into anything. And the bottom of the lineup, a couple of inconsistencies there, especially from guys like Alvarez, who continues to look like he might be playing himself out of the starting catcher role because Torrens went 2 for 3 in his one appearance during the series. But yeah, just again, a lot of inconsistencies. And you look at the 8 runs last night, and a lot of it was honestly just because Kenley Jansen and Rich Hill just couldn't find the damn strike zone. So, but yeah, I don't know if you want to give your thoughts on the offense as a whole before we talk about individuals, but
Yeah, no, the offense, like I mentioned before, they got to be a lot better because, like we were saying before, just too much scoring in bunches. And I mean, look, I mean, if we want to get into it more specifically and break it down player by player, because while maybe people don't want to admit it with Pete Alonso because he's a fan favorite, you always go to Citi Field, you see a bunch of Pete Alonso jerseys. You got the Pete Alonso chant every time he's up at bat, but the numbers with just guys in scoring position and guys without guys on base, it's so drastic and it's so disappointing because if you look at the advanced stats with when Pete Alonso was up with empty bases in this year, he's hitting 271 with a 339 on base percentage, a 521 slugging percentage with an 859 OPS for a WRC plus at 141. You look at that and say, okay, maybe a little bit, maybe I expect a little more better, but decent numbers. You then go ahead and look with runners in scoring position, and this is where it gets ugly because Pete has a 211 batting average, a 329 on base percentage, a 398 slugging percentage with a 728 OPS with a 102 WRC plus. And you compare that to years before because you look at 2019 when he had that big home run year, 137 WRC plus with runners in scoring position. 2022, another big year from it, 185 WRC plus with runners in scoring position. His fall off and his I mean, to be fair, his unclutchness with runners in scoring position has been a real detriment to this team so far. And it could be one of the reasons why they ultimately end up falling short without a playoff spot this year.
yeah, there needs to be a conversation there because it's like as much as people think it's like, oh, because people, I see people constantly posting his baseline numbers and being like, this is a down year for him, lol. It's like, yeah, the baseline numbers aren't terrible, but when you break it down to the way you just did of, like, he's a league average hitter with runners in scoring position. Like, I'm sorry, that's not good enough from a guy that's supposed to be one of the star players, quote unquote, of this team. And like, the offense used to run through this guy. Like, he was the engine of this offense for years. And it was always, if Pete wasn't going, this offense wasn't going. And now it's just kind of been like, it's just been the opposite, sort of, where not that the offense doesn't go, but the offense is going because of Lindor right now. But yeah, it's just like he's doing the opposite of driving the offense, and he's honestly just hurting them where rallies are being killed with him. I mean, last night you saw it when he was up in that situation with guys on base and he's just swinging at garbage pitches and he just looks lost up there. And I don't understand. I don't know what's going on anymore. And I know that we have ripped on Chavez about the fact that he's he's had Pete Alonso hit more for contact this year, and it's very apparent. But some of these at bats too, it's just like, what are you doing? You just look complete loss. And you look at the percentiles even on Baseball Savant, and it's just like he's not squaring the ball up as much as he has in years prior. He's really I'm pretty sure his barrel numbers are also down. I mean, it's a little down. It's not drastic, but it's a little bit down still. And his strikeout numbers, I mean, the strikeouts it's ugly strikeouts. It's not even like,
Yeah, it's not even competitive. He swings at so many balls in the dirt. It's not even funny.
yeah, it's really ugly. And I don't know what it's going to take anymore for things to change, because this is just, like you said, it's not good enough. And this could ultimately be a difference potentially down the stretch in this team making the playoffs or not making the playoffs. Or if they do get to the playoffs, it could be the difference in them winning a series versus not, because there's only so much Lindor could do. And that's also the same conversation for Nimmo, because Nimmo can't be excluded from this because he's hitting in the top of the order as well. He needs to get way more consistent than he's been. And I don't know what it's going to take for that either. And I don't know what has happened here in the second half with Nimmo, but he also needs to get his shit together, because at some point, not hitting and just relying on the walks and not capitalizing on runners in scoring position is going to hurt you. But again, credit to guys like Jesse Winker, who did capitalize with runners in scoring position. And, credit to Lindor, who continues to drive the offense. And then Mark Vientos, even, who has just been, he continues to be unbelievable this season. Those three have been the most consistent hitters, honestly, as of lately. And Nimmo and Alonso just need to get there. And in terms of other guys in the lineup, I look at Marte and say he needs to not play as much, especially if Winker's going to keep swinging the bat this way. There's just no reason.
No, yeah, I mean, the love fest right now with Lindor is just insane, because you just feel like every time he gets up to that plate that he's going to do something special. I mean, you go back to the second game of the series where the Mets are up 3-1 and bottom of the eighth, and McNeil gets on base, and you just, or sorry, it was a 3-2 game at that point, and you just knew that Lindor came up and he was going to do something big. And of course, he had that big double to bring in McNeil to make it a 4-2 game. He was the only one who had the offense going so far early in that game, obviously with the 2-run home run of Carter Crawford, but he's just continuing his strong MVP case. And look, most likely, like we said, it's going to be Ohtani's MVP, but he doesn't deserve to lose the MVP. He doesn't. And then, especially like I've been saying before, and Mets Twitter really has to get behind this. Obviously, last night we saw the MVP chance, and I was just loving that, because this is a guy that deserves it. But the fan base right now in the offseason has to push for Lindor being named captain. Because like I said, this is a guy that goes out there. He plays every day. He plays gold glove defense. I mean, you go back to last night's game, and when that bullpen was up and it was in the midst of working through that game, you had 3 big double plays that the Mets had to turn, and all three of them went through Francisco Lindor. And he also made a nice defensive play where the ball got hit
Yoshida
softly.
had the liner in the
Yeah,
eighth inning last night.
he caught that, but there was also a ball earlier in the game where it was a small little dribbler. Lindor had to come in, scoop it up, throw it over the first base. He's been incredible. Vientos ever since that the batting lineup changed since moving him up to the 2 hole and the 3 hole. He's been impressive. He's continuing to hit home runs. And listen, Jesse Winker, I know it wasn't the most sexiest move when David Stearns acquired him, and he wasn't necessarily great in his first couple games here because even the numbers back it up. I mean, because so far Winker's played 30 games, and through his first 15 games, look at the batting average. Okay, 292 average. Like, okay, that's pretty good, but it was really the OPS, the on base, the slugging that was really down because 320 on base percentage, a slugging percentage of 333, so a 533, 633 OPS to his first 15 games with an 88 WRC plus. However, though, his next 15 games is really where he turned it on. 324 average, 366 on base, a 649 slugging for an OPS over 1,000 with a WRC plus at 177. He's completely turned around his game at the plate. Sorry, hitting big home runs. Had that big home run against the White Sox. Had the big walk off against the Baltimore Orioles, and then with that big grand slam last night to put the Mets up 4-0 earlier in the game.
It feels like ever since he hit the walk off, he's been performing a lot better, and I will absolutely take it. I'm not gonna sit here and complain one bit about it, and I will again be more than happy to fill out the apology form if he's gonna keep performing like this. So yeah, he needs to keep playing. I'm still like I said, or no, the point that I was going to bring up was the defensive point too. In general, we are seeing right now why David Stearns though preached defense in the offseason and how run prevention is everything. Because I mean, how many times do we see it this series? Whether it's Luis Torrens gunning runners down, whether it's Harrison Bader in the outfield making plays that weren't routine plays with how garbage the Mets defense is more routine. Even last night, stops a ball that could have been potentially an extra base hit, stops it from being an extra base hit. You're just seeing the defense of this team improve so much, and it's not just Lindor. Like, you're getting the run prevention is just everything. It's helping them win more games, and yeah, that's another reason though Lindor should win MVP, because a lot of it is him, where he's really helped the infield defense be better as a whole, especially with Vientos. But yeah, again, the MVP conversation we could wait on. But in terms of Winker, yeah, he needs to keep playing. Like, I honestly am at the point where I would give him a shot against lefties. Like, if he's gonna keep playing like this, and if Marte's gonna continue to be this bad, I'm sorry, at some point you gotta just try Winker against lefties, or I might even be more willing to put Tyrone Taylor in right now. Like, I am that annoyed with the way Marte is playing.
Yeah, Marte's just been, and I've said it before, like, I don't expect Starling Marte to be on this roster next year. I think he's either going to be DFA'd or traded at some point in the offseason. But while he's here, I mean, you could use him for the occasional pinch hitting opportunity. But other than that, his game time really needs to be cut down, especially like with Winker playing well right now, and especially since Nimmo, Bader, Taylor, those are guys that are going to give you a lot better defense in the outfield later in games. But yeah, going back to that point which you just mentioned about the defense, and yeah, it's something that Stearns really he prioritizes. I mean, like you mentioned before, when Maton came in and the ref Snyder hit that ball into the gap, and Bader did a nice job of cutting that off to only hold them to a single. You had Torrens, who has been a hell of a pickup again, gunning guys down, when trying to steal. And even Alvarez last night, even though his defense has been a little shaky, the last couple of games, he had that really nice back pick yesterday, which caused the I forgot who was on base for the Red Sox, but they caused him to go into a rundown, and it ultimately ended the inning because I think McGill was kind of struggling a little bit at that point. So yeah, defense has been big for this team.
Yeah, And I think that also we'll see correlate into this offseason with decisions on certain guys. So we'll, of course, have those conversations more in depth when the time comes. But yeah, in terms of the series as a whole, like we said, to summarize, pitching continues to be dominant. The lineup maybe still could be better, and if they could, and it becomes cohesive, this type of performance, then all of a sudden this team becomes even more dangerous. But do you have anything else you want to bring up with this series before we segue into further conversations?
No, I pretty much got everything that I had to say.
So we'll segue into a little bit of the injury stuff and in terms of roster transactions, because there was some roster moves that occurred today. JD Martinez is back from the paternity list. Congratulations again to him on the sex. And it looks like DJ Stewart is going back down to the minor leagues. So I really am not going to complain there. So yeah, DJ Stewart goes back down for him. And then they also picked up, I'm trying to get the guy's name again. I forgot who they picked up from San Diego today, which I don't know why this is not loading for me, but regardless, Jose Azocar, that's who they picked up from, and then they put Sean Reed Foley on the 60-day injured list, which not a surprise. He hasn't pitched in a while, so at this point, put him on. I don't know if he's going to even return at this rate during the season, and either way, with the way guys are pitching and the way Fujinami is playing even in AAA as a reinforcement if needed, I don't think there needs to be a rush to bring Sean Reed Foley back. So it's looking like nothing's happening there. In terms of Christian Scott, he continues to progress well, and we could end up seeing him somewhat soon, maybe go on a rehab assignment. He has been throwing a lot lately. Nunez feeling better than he's been, so it's weird because he had that outing, which I don't know why they even gave him more than an inning in that outing in the first place, but regardless, Nunez didn't feel right after that outing, and it's looking like things were better right as they put him on the IL because, of course, and he'll probably be back once the 15-day stint is over, so he should be back very soon. And then on top of that, there's really, there's nothing else in terms of injuries and roster moves. And then Paul Blackburn, I guess, is the last guy you could mention who will make his next start in the turn of the rotation there, which will be in 4 days from now in Toronto, most likely. So, or 4 days from tomorrow, I should say, because of the off day. So, yeah, we'll see in terms of if there's anything else that transpires with the roster and maybe some call-ups, some send-downs in terms of the September call-ups, because they don't have to necessarily keep the guys that they called up for September call-ups on the roster. They could always change things, especially if Drew Gilbert's going to keep hitting this way. But we'll segue to the Red Series before we wrap it up here. Not that there's really much to talk about because we kind of gave our brief thoughts beforehand, where at this point, you sweep the Red Sox, you really should at least have a 5-1 homestand at this rate. Manaea will get the start in game 1. The Reds don't have their pitchers announced. Quintana gets a second start, which if there's a loss, I'm not going to point to which game it is, but just know what I'm thinking. And then Luis Severino gets the third game, as he will get his second start of the homestand, and then they will go to Toronto. But yeah, in terms of expectations, what do you have? Even though I think I know what you're going to say.
Ideally, I want to sweep, but I mean, I wouldn't mind 2-1. You go on a 5-1 homestand, but I mean, even looking ahead again, I mean, to the Blue Jays series, I mean, you have 2 series against 2 teams that are struggling right now. I mean, even though I know the Reds just came off a 2-game sweep over the Astros, which there was some weird stat the other day that said that the Astros hadn't been beating the Reds since 2016. I mean, that's wild to me. But I mean, look, you got 2 winnable series coming up before you head to Philly for a 3-game set. I mean, over the next 6 games, if they could go 5-1, like, that would be ideal. And I kind of just noticed it now, but the Mets have been kind of blessed with some off days in this month of September. I mean, obviously they had the off day today, which allowed them to use the bullpen yesterday. You have an off day in between the Blue Jays series and the Phillies series. So if you need to rest guys or really use guys in that Blue Jay series, you can. And then the big one is after that 4-game set against the Phillies and before the Atlanta series, you have an off day in between there. So I mean, if you really have to use out your bullpen in that final game of that Phillies series to make a much needed win and rest guys before you head into that Atlanta series, that's big. So we're gonna see some interesting games with Mendy, in this last month in terms of managing the bullpen. So I'm interested to see how he handles those off days.
Yeah, that's something that's going to be very beneficial down the stretch here, and especially as we get really later on. And I'm glad they get an off day before that Philly series. That really makes me happy to hear, and before the Atlanta series, because those are two of the most important series. Because if they go into Philly and surprise us with winning 3 of those games somehow, I mean, I'm not saying they're going to do it. I want to make that clear. But if they somehow surprise us and they keep treading water and they somehow win 3 against Philly, I mean, there could be a conversation about bigger than just the wild card potentially at that point. But I won't get too ahead of myself there. They still have to take care of business against the Reds, which, like you said in the chat, Yuki, they ended up sweeping the Astros, which scares me, but also doesn't, because the Astros, in terms of
Yeah, the Astros need to beat the Diamondbacks for us. So
they had their pitching staff is very up and down, and then they lost 1-0 yesterday, and their lineup even right now is like missing a couple pieces and not performing well. So it's not like the Astros are some otherworldly team this year, and the Mets would be leading that division if they were in the same division as them. I want to make that clear, but I'm not going to take the Reds lightly still, because they do have pieces there. But yeah, I mean, you got to win 2 out of 3 minimum, because at this point you got to go 5-1 on the homestand after sweeping the Red Sox. You just got to, and then yeah, you go into Toronto. That's a series where, again, that's a team that you shouldn't take lightly because there are talented players there, but we'll of course discuss that further. But is there anything else you wanted to bring up conversation wise before we wrap it up?
no, I mean, really just reemphasize what we've been saying. This team they just have to keep on winning. Hopefully the offense starts to figure it out in terms of not scoring in bunches. Hopefully the pitching staff continues to pitch well, both starting wise and bullpen wise. And listen, just keep winning your games, keep winning series, and keep on putting pressure against the on the Braves. And hopefully the Astros are able, to beat the Diamondbacks at least 2 out of 3 in that series.
Yeah. So let's see what happens down the stretch here, and let's hope, like you were saying, they could just keep winning, tread water. That's really the main point. Just keep on winning and keep on treading water until you get down to Atlanta. That's been the conversation. It probably will. And we did briefly, but yeah, to wrap it up, we could talk about Senga a little bit. And to me, if it's even a debate, it shouldn't be. I would easily make sure I would easily have Senga come back as a starter, which also really puts more the point that they need to put McGill in the bullpen even further, because if Senga is only available for 4 or 5 innings on his starts, maybe even 3 some days, you need a guy that could give multiple innings out of the bullpen. But yeah, I don't want to make Senga go through the motions of, going through a routine of trying to be a relief pitcher, because there is an adjustment period there. Just let him be a starter, let him be where he's comfortable. And again, don't bring him back too. I mean, I don't have to say this because I know the Mets won't, but don't bring him back if the Mets somehow collapse, God forbid, and fall out of it. But I trust them not to do that. But yeah, it's also exciting that he might come back earlier than we thought.
No, yeah, like you said, like don't force him back, don't rush him back. If the Mets fall out of it or he's not feeling 100%, because while cool, it would be nice to make the playoffs this year. You also have to look towards the next year, and I don't want to damage Senga anymore because he's going to be a valuable piece of the bullpen. I mean, sorry, the rotation for the next couple of years. And yeah, like I mentioned before at the start of the stream, like if you're going into a wild card series and you have 4 guys right now and Peterson, Manaea, Sevy, Senga that you could legitimately trust in any of those starts, that's a good problem for the Mets to have. And then like we were saying before, with McGill potentially moving into the bullpen as a long man, you could move Paul Blackburn into the bullpen as a long man, and he could give you valuable innings. I mean, like we saw in 2015, with the big stars that the Mets had, with Syndergaard, DeGrom, Harvey, Matz, and those guys. Like the 2 guys that moved into the bullpen from that rotation was Neese and Cologne, and they gave valuable innings for that team in a deep playoff run. So I mean, I would hope that those 2 could do the same.
Yeah, exactly. So, there is value there to getting those multi-inning relievers. So we'll see what happens down the stretch here, and we'll see if Senga gets to have the chance to return, which if you ask me right now, I'm confident he will. I'm confident that this team is going to I hate that I feel optimistic because it never goes good when I do, but I'm feeling optimistic that they will be in a spot to where that could happen down the stretch. But that's going to be it for us. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching. We'll be back again, of course, after this coming up series. Don't forget to leave a like, though, on the stream if you haven't already. Don't forget to subscribe. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. And we will see you guys in the next one.